A spate of weekend violence around the world makes clear that global Islamic terrorism remains a threat to the West. The worst was a bloody attack, allegedly by a father and son, on a Hanukkah celebration that killed at least 15 people, including at least one child in Australia. Plus, a Hong Kong court hands down its guilty verdict against Jimmy Lai, the publisher who has been in prison for 5 years. Could the verdict be the start of diplomacy that could win Jimmy Lai's release?
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome. This is Potomac Watch, a daily podcast of the Wall Street Journal. I'm Paul Gigot, editorial page editor of the Journal, and I'm here with two of my colleagues, Bill McGurn and Elliot Kaufman, both of whom follow the world. All right, Elliot, let's start with the eruption of violence over the weekend by jihadists with many places, both attempted and in one case in Germany foiled, but elsewhere, unfortunately, bloody success, if that's the word you want to use. Let's start with that attack on the U.S. base in Syria, where two soldiers and a civilian died.
Yes, you have an ISIS attacker who is a member of the Syrian security forces attacking U.S. soldiers and a U.S. civilian interpreter. So you have 3 killed and 3 wounded.
This was an ambush, basically, was it not?
That's right. That's right. By someone who's expected to be working with the U.S. troops, because that's now the new relationship with the Syrian regime. And that's a good thing, actually, that finally, after all of these decades, Syria is in the American orbit. However, you have this problem of the new Syrian army and the new Syrian regime. As many have pointed out, Syria's president, Ahmed al-Shara, used to lead al-Qaeda's Syrian branch. Now, he has clearly undergone a major shift since then.
Right.
But his army and the people who have been with him the longest rallied to his banner when it was the al-Qaeda banner, and then afterward in Islamist jihadist banner. And you even have commanders in the Syrian army who are foreign jihadists. We have raised this issue. The U.S. government has raised this issue. The Shara regime has been very reluctant to do much about it. I think this terrorist attack is going to be an impetus. Something has to change if there is going to be cooperation with the U.S., including U.S. forces.
Al-Shara apologized. He offered his condolences to the United States and clearly denounced the murders. I guess the question is, what can we do about something like this? Is it just because President Trump said this is ISIS, Islamic State, which still exists in Syria, not the Syrian army per se?
And the continued presence and survival of ISIS is one reason why there still is a residual U.S. force in Syria. It's meant to fight that. And finally, we have Syrian government cooperation in that regard, starting with political cooperation, hopefully leading to military cooperation. So that, it would seem, needs to continue, but it's quite difficult when you can't trust that Syrian army itself.
All right, let's listen to President Trump reacts to the killings.
So we mourn the loss of 3 great patriots in Syria. You know how it happened. It was an ambush, terrible. We also have 3 wounded. They seem to be doing pretty well. But we mourn the loss. These are 3 great people. And it's just a terrible thing. Syria, by the way, was fighting along with us. The new president of Syria is, as they told me, and I'm not surprised, he's devastated by what happened. This was an ISIS attack on us and Syria. And again, we mourn the loss and we pray for them and their parents and their loved ones. Very, very sad.
Mr. President, will the U.S. retaliate against ISIS?
Yeah, we will.
And will you U.S. forces are attacked again?
You're going to be seeing.
And should the U.S. still be in?
We will retaliate. Thank you very much.
So Tom Barak, who's the U.S. envoy, Elliot, in Syria or in Lebanon, said that the U.S. deployment, it's a couple thousand troops, I think now, maybe even less than that at this stage, should continue in Syria, despite the risks we have seen over the weekend. And one of the reasons is because ISIS is still there. It could come back. And we're helping to supervise something like, literally thousands of ISIS prisoners in camps there.
Yes. And Syria, even though there is this new central government, it has yet to be able to truly centralize authority. And there are all kinds of reasons why. There is a Turkish occupied region. There is a small Israeli occupied region, a larger Israeli sphere of influence there, a Druze area, all kinds, a Kurdish area. And when you have a situation like that, when there isn't a clear central authority, that's where ISIS has been able to thrive. And so you have prisoners, diffuse authority. It's a dangerous situation. And so there is a role for a small U.S. force to help keep things like this down.
All right, let's talk about the worst event of the weekend. They're all awful, but the worst was this shooting at Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia. At least 15 people killed by this father-son attack, foiled by this hero who grabbed one of the shooters from behind and took his gun away and was wounded for his effort. It could have been worse, but it was aimed at a Hanukkah celebration, clearly a deliberate anti-Semitic motivated event, Elliot. We had a piece in our paper today about how Australia just hasn't done enough, the government, to stop the rise of anti-Semitism in Australia since October 7th, 2023, and that horrible attack from Gaza to Israel. Another illustration of how anti-Semitism is on the rise in the West.
Yes, and for Australia, it has seen this in a big way, really, since right after Hamas's October 7th, 2023 attack and massacre in Israel. You had large crowds cheering that attack in Sydney. And this shocked Australian people who certainly don't think of their country in that way, but have had to realize that some of the people, not all of them certainly, but some of the people that they have let in would cheer a massacre like that. Since then, you've seen major anti-Israel and anti-Semitic incitement. Australian government, unfortunately, a Labor government, joining some of these extreme anti-Israel lies. But you also saw Iranian-run and sponsored terrorist attacks against the Jewish community of Australia. Mm-hmm. The firebombing of a synagogue, firebombing of a kosher bakery. That is something new for Australia. Certainly, nobody expected that, but Australia found itself in a situation where, given intelligence information by Israel, they verified it and found that they had to expel Iran's ambassador because this was going on, a blatant attack on one very small minority in their country. So there has been a spate of attacks now, but this is certainly the worst in many, many years.
Well, the Labor Party in Australia, it's a center-left party. It's the ruling party now in the government, has similar problems to the U.S. Democratic Party in the sense that it used to be the home of Australian Jews. But for the most part, as in the U.S., the Democratic Party home of most Jewish voters, but in recent years has become influenced by a pro-Palestinian and an anti-Israel segment that is becoming quite much more prominent. And I think you can say that has created to a certain kind of a reluctance or hesitation. If you wanted to be nasty, you'd say cowardice on the part of the Anthony Albanese government, not to stand up to this kind of anti-Israel sentiment that so often really blends into larger anti-Semitic views.
Yes, and it becomes, on the one hand, a gateway, and on the other hand, disabling. Because once you allow for a sort of lie that Israel has committed genocide, that's about as bad a word and a deed as we have. And then where do you go from there? You say, oh, well, look at this local synagogue. They're genocide supporters. They're genocide apologists. And just about every mainstream Jewish organization, whether here or there, all of a sudden you can tar them as the worst moral criminals in your society. And we've seen that path be taken, leading to not only sort of nasty protests outside of Jewish synagogues and other institutions, but even violence. And once you've accepted some of these lies and some of these links, there's not so much that you can say about it, or by the time you do speak up, it's too late.
And Anthony Albanese, the prime minister, denounced the murders, obviously denounced anti-Semitism, but blamed it in part on guns. We need to tighten the Australian gun laws, though Australia has some of the strictest gun laws in the world. It is, I would say, the wrong thing to stress in a situation like this. All right, let's turn to Jimmy Lai, the verdict against the publisher after 5 years in jail. It only took, I think 150 some days, Bill McGurn, to have the court finally render a verdict. And Jimmy Lai was, of course, the publisher of the Apple Daily, which was a pro-democracy publication. Jimmy Lai, who we all know personally, was active in pro-democracy politics, personal friends of ours, also a contributor to our opinion pages, which, by the way, one of those contributions listed in the statement in the verdict statement by the court as contributing to his sentence and guilty verdict for sedition. Let's listen to Sebastian Lai, his son, talk about the verdict.
In the 800-page verdict that they have, there's essentially nothing. There's nothing that incriminates him. There's nothing that even under their own legal system would make him guilty. And so this is an example. This is a perfect example of how the national security law has been molded and weaponized against someone who essentially said stuff that they didn't like. I think if we're talking about smear campaigns, which is what the Chinese government might call what we're doing now, and the reporting that you guys are doing, I think it's hard to smear the Hong Kong legal system more than this judgment and more than this trial.
There was never a chance that a court in Hong Kong was going to defy Beijing and find Jimmy Lai not guilty. But I have scanned and read in parts the 850-some verdict statement, and what I see there is a man who, Jimmy Lai, who talked to a lot of people about supporting democracy in Hong Kong and freedom in Hong Kong, wrote in his publication and in ours that he opposed the Chinese attempt to impose a national security law, among other damaging laws that restricted freedom, and that's basically. Oh, he did also meet and talk to Bill McGurn, Bill.
Yeah.
And you made it into the statement.
Yeah, not one of my prouder moments.
Actually, Bill, I think you have nothing to be at all upset about, other than the fact that the court somehow thinks that someone talking to a foreign journalist is seditious.
Yeah. When you look at Jimmy Lai, what he's done is what any good publisher would do, who's passionate about its principles. And he did it for years under the British and criticized the British government often, but somehow that never got him in trouble. It's only when China took over that he had a problem. I mean, you and I both lived in Hong Kong. You remember the Joint Declaration in 1984. Jimmy's whole raison d'etre is just to get the Chinese side to live up to it. And they've been walking away from it ever since the day they signed it. And
that was the agreement with the British to turn over Hong Kong. 50 years of autonomy starting in 1997.
And the general thought was China would get Hong Kong, but Hong Kong would get to preserve its freedoms. And China's been chiseling away at that any month. Look, in some ways, you and I never doubted the outcome. We knew what was coming. Everyone knew what was coming. This is the least surprising verdict that I've ever seen. Everyone knew what was coming. But it's good to get it over with, because no one thought Jimmy could ever get out of jail until he had been convicted. The Chinese have to run through the little farce, pretend he's like a terrorist or something, and then maybe negotiations can start to get him out.
The way these dictatorships work, and you saw it with Russia and our reporter. The way it works is they feel they need to have a conviction,
Right.
and then maybe followed with a sentencing. And the sentencing in Jimmy's case is forthcoming, but they feel they need to get a conviction because, see, we proved in a court of law, no matter how farcical,
Right.
that he's guilty. And then now maybe negotiations can start with the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who is traveling to Beijing next month, I think,
Right.
and then Donald Trump in April. Both of those visits give an opportunity for discussions with Xi Jinping and requests by these leaders to free Jimmy. What do you think of those prospects, Bill?
Well, I think you're right. There was no prospect as long as he wasn't convicted. They're not going to let him go without a conviction and maybe a sentencing. So in a sense, it's good that we're moving ahead, that we're getting this behind us. Then the real negotiations can start. And actually, what Donald Trump and Keir Starmer should emphasize, they're doing China a favor. Hong Kong has boxed Beijing into a corner by putting Jimmy Lai on trial. No one, you can read the transcript. You see, he was really just an energetic publisher. And they now box themselves in a corner because they painted this guy as like a terrorist. So Jimmy opposed the violence during demonstrations against government in a couple of years ago. He's been very consistent. And so they don't know what to do with him. And Trump can say, hey, I'm giving you guys a way out if you're smart enough to take it.
Keir Starmer obviously has less leverage,
Right,
because Britain has such a diminished role in international affairs. But there is an embassy in London. It's called a super embassy that China wants to be approved. It's in a very prime location if you want to do espionage in London. And it needs the approval of the British government. Could Starmer use that as leverage?
Well, I think he should have, but I don't think that's possible now. They've gone so far. He's desperate to get China's approval on trade and all sorts of things. He doesn't like the Jimmy Lai issue. It's a kind of irritant in all the negotiations, and so he's looked the other way on most everything. I don't think they're gonna bring it up with regard to the embassy. That decision's already been made. And also, I think there's a provision in British law that says they can't use extraneous issues in negotiating deals with the country. I think they could get around it if they really believed in freedom and so forth. Let's remember, Jimmy Lai is a full British citizen. The passport he travels on and carries is British. He's always been a British citizen. And I think it's horrible the way Britain is abandoning its citizens. Donald Trump is more interested in Jimmy Lai's fate than his own prime minister.
Yeah, it is. It is terribly disappointing, British friends. Let's talk about President Trump. In the campaign of 2024, he said he would get Jimmy Lai out of prison, promised he would. Now, since then, he has said he will try to get him out. And we know that White House officials are interested in this. They would like to see Jimmy Lai out. I guess the question is, what does Donald Trump have to give Xi Jinping in return?
There's negotiations going on. The U.S. side is preparing. I don't know what they're prepared to offer. I suspect that Jimmy Lai won't be a single piece. Like, we'll give you Jimmy Lai and you give us X trade deal or something. I don't think it's going to work like that. There might be multiple hostages. There might be other cases. Trump is in a bit of a pickle because Jimmy's not an American. So a lot of people say, why are you going to bat for this American? Well, at the trial, as you see, what Hong Kong really objected to, Jimmy was an admirer of the U.S. and was fully on the U.S. side in a lot of disputes, in addition to being a symbol of freedom. So we should be in favor of him. But I don't know what they're going to do, but it's good that he's part of the negotiations. The Chinese know that he's there. And if, as I say, if they're smart, they'll realize this guy is 78 years old, just had his birthday like last week. He has diabetes, all sorts of health issues. He's been in solitary for most of the last 5 years, not speaking to anyone in contact. He's in bad health. And I don't think they want him to die in prison. You know, right now he's a hero. If that happened, he'd be a martyr, and you don't know what would come after. So I maintain Trump and Starmer, if they get together, they'd be doing China a favor. Take this off of the table, because the alternative, if Jimmy Lai's not out, you know, Paul, the press corps is going to ask questions. What about Jimmy Lai, Mr. President? You said you were going to get him out during the campaign. What is China saying? And it could mar the whole visit, both visits.
Yeah, I think you just want to underscore the trials, not the sham show trial that was just rendered a verdict on, but the trials of Jimmy Lai in prison. I mean, he's been in prison now for 5 years, okay, something like 1,800 days. He's in a cell in Stanley Prison that is not air conditioned, that has only a small source of light. He gets out, about an hour a day, Bill? That's about it for out of the cell, we have heard. And he is 78 years old with diabetes and other ailments. It's grotesque punishment that he is enduring here because of his principles and his belief in freedom.
Yeah, and let me stress the solitary confinement. Because as I understand it, solitary is not meant to be a permanent condition. You know, you get it for having a fight or something and maybe a week or 2 weeks. It's 5 years for him to be cut off from the other prison population, to only see his family a couple of days. There's questions about his health care that he's getting, about religious observance, not letting a priest in to give him communion. All this he's enduring, and he's held up pretty well. If you see his face when he goes into court, it lights up because his wife is there and she's been a rock. But, you know, a man can only take so much, and it could really redound on Beijing in an ugly way. I would reverse the question. Are they going to let Jimmy Lai screw up their goals, what they want in negotiations, because they're stubborn on keeping this now old, sickly man in jail? It's really dumb.
But the cruelty is the point, Bill. And that's the Communist Party saying we are going to set demonstrate through our treatment and punishment of Jimmy Lai a lesson for anybody else who dares to speak up for freedom. All right, we'll leave it there today. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Elliot. Appreciate your coming in today. And thank you all for listening. We are here every day on Potomac Watch.